Okay, so before I do this question, I'm going to have a quick look at each one of these terms. So we've got a secondary key as a term. Secondary key? In fact, before I do anything, pause the video, give it a go yourself. Okay, so secondary key is, best way to explain it is by giving an example. Let's imagine that we've got a table for students where we've got a student ID, which is like an auto field. Every time we get a new student, we get given an auto ID. We've also got their enrollment number or candidate number for exams. I call it candidate. This is also unique. Now, this is our primary key. This isn't our primary key, but it could be our primary key, but we're choosing not to use this as our primary key. Therefore, it could be used as what we call a secondary key. We could use the search information by using this and then pointing to this. So a secondary key is still unique, but hasn't been used as a primary key. Now, we've got candidate key, which you should be aware of. We'll talk about that again in a minute. We've got entity. Now, an entity is basically an object or anything which we're going to store data about. So it could be student, exam results. It could be movies watched. All of these are different objects which is possible to store data about. We've got foreign key, which you guys should be familiar with, primary key, table, and a tuple. Now, another way for saying tuple is a record. So, and you should know what a record is. Let's have a look at matching these up. An object, person, or thing which is possible to store data about. Well, we just talked about this. Entity. Dataset organized in rows and columns. The columns form the structure and the rows form the content. Well, this is obviously talking about a table. A database table like this, where we've got the structure and the content through rows and columns or fields and records. This is a record. This is a field. Okay, any attribute or combination of attributes that can act as a unique key. So the very fact that we've got a combination of attributes means we can use this as a candidate key. What's another name for a candidate key? You've learnt about it? Compound. Okay. Attributes in a table that link to the primary key in another table to form a relationship. To form a relationship, we need foreign keys. And finally, attribute or combination of attributes that is used to identify a record. And this being the primary key. Notice the difference between the primary key and the candidate key. Candidate key doesn't mention about identifying records, whilst the primary key does. Okay, so explain the term referential integrity. Well, I'm going to do that via an example for you. We've got two different tables. We're going to call this table user. In fact, it would be better if we had three tables, so I'm going to draw a little table here. Movie and watched. Where we've got user 1, Joe Smith. Movies, we can have 1, 2, 3, 4, Titanic, Baywatch, Shawshank Redemption. Why have I picked really big names? I'm just going to call it Shaw. And Forrest Gump. Let's have Mike Smith, Sally Smith. All of these aren't related. So we could have a watch ID of 1. Let's do a different color. Let's put these in different colors. So movie ID could be in blue. And keep that in red. We could have Joe Smith, who's watched The Shawshank Redemption. We could also have watch ID 2, where we have Joe Smith, who's watched different blue, Forrest Gump. We can then have third movie watched by Sally Smith, who's watched. Now, we've got something called referential integrity. So we need to make sure that the information we've got in here is equal to the information we've got in here about that same person. So what I mean by that is this. If we delete Sally Smith and the information is kept in here, we don't have referential integrity anymore. Our data is inconsistent. This is saying that we've got someone with ID number 3 who watched Forrest Gump. But we don't have anyone with an ID of 3. Therefore, we've got inconsistent data. So we don't have referential integrity anymore. So, in order for us to have referential integrity, we've got to follow some rules. Number 1 would be if we delete a user or delete a record in a primary table, we're going to call this a primary one, P for primary, then all the linked tables, such as this one, delete record, linked table, auto updates and deletes. We call this a cascade delete. What does that mean? Well, we delete Sally Smith here, that's gone as well. Very, very simple. So if a record is deleted in the primary table, which is this, all the data about that record is also deleted in its linked tables. Number 2, so let me just put cascade delete here, and I can talk about this later in my answer. Number 2, how can we ensure we get referential integrity? Well, what I don't want to do, whoa, easy tell you. I need to use my eraser. Look at that, there we go, nice, thank you. Okay, what I don't want to do is add, shall we say, a record to this table unless there's a record corresponding in this table. So for example, I don't want to be adding the 4th movie watched was watched by person number 6 who watched the Titanic, because there's no corresponding person number 6 in the primary table. So what we don't want to do is add a record in foreign table without a primary, no, sorry, without a record in primary table. I'm going to add the word corresponding. So say that again. I don't want to be adding. Let's imagine that we added movie. Okay, so the 5th movie watched was watched by Mike Smith, and they watched movie number 9, because we didn't have a movie number 9, so we shouldn't be able to do that. Unless we have a movie number 9 in our primary table, we can't add it into the foreign table. That is another referential integrity rule. Okay. This final one is this. Let's imagine that I changed this from Forrest Gump to FG for Forrest Gump. I just renamed it to make it easier to store my database. This in here will need to also be updated. In fact, that's a bad example because we haven't got anything to do with FG. So let's imagine that I've given this a new ID, Forrest Gump, and I've given it the ID of 14. Don't ask me why, I have no idea. I want it to automatically update these to be 14 as well. So it's called a Cascade update. Whereby we update the primary table, in this case this table here for movie, and it updates the foreign link tables automatically. That's a Cascade update. Why do we do all of this? To make sure that our data is consistent. So we've got Cascade delete, we delete it in the primary table, it deletes it in our foreign tables. We add a record, it prevents us from adding a record in our foreign table without us having it in our primary table. And finally, a Cascade update. If we update our primary table, it updates our foreign tables as well.